What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Things You Don't Hear in Church podcast. My name's Ethan.
My name's Derry.
And we are in person for the first time in a few months.
Yep.
Good time. By the time you're watching this, Derry will have been gone and I'll be in Detroit.
Yep.
Married.
Yep. Crazy.
Derry's here for the week for my bachelor party and the wedding. And
Yeah.
so we're in a couple podcast episodes in.
Yep. I'm jet lagged and we just went to the gym, so we're feeling good.
Oh, yes.
And bad at the
All the
same time.
roids going through us.
I simultaneously have no energy, but all of the energy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a great feeling.
Last night we also went to the gym because gym every day, and we went to...
Well, we didn't really go to the gym.
Well, I went to the sauna. It was great though. And I got in the sauna and I was so jet lagged. Like I had slept a couple hours in the last 40 hours or whatever. And got in the sauna, we were in there for 17, 18 minutes or something. And we got out and we took a ice shower, just super, super cold shower. And on the drive home, my brain just didn't work. It was just completely gone. And I remember Ethan asked me a question and I answered him. And I was just I told him, I was I didn't answer that question. I said something, but I didn't use my brain to say it.
Yeah.
I just I said words.
Been there.
It was so fun.
It's like when you have a killer workout, that's how you're just the whole drive home just numb. The only thing you're thinking about is, I need food.
I wasn't thinking about anything. I tried to think about things too.
Yeah.
And my brain was just in another land.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's in a good way.
It's a great feeling.
Yeah.
Because then you're just and then if you do that, at least, not working out necessarily before bed, but that feeling right before sleeping.
Yeah.
It's the best.
It was almost euphoric. It was awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, today we're going to be talking to you about...
a fun topic. We're talking about belief and if it's a choice or not. So, to give some context, there's been some debating online recently about belief and if it's something that you get to choose to believe in something or if it's something that you just happens to you, right? So the context for this is on TikTok there was some pretty conservative Christians that were talking to these deconstructionist pages, and the Christians, well, the deconstructionist page in Pacific was also a Christian page, someone who had reconstructed,
okay.
a pastor actually, but they were just talking about the nature of belief. Mm-hmm. And the conservative Christian channel was you deconstruction is evil because you chose to not believe in God and then chose to think about it and then reconstruct your faith. And the person was the Christian who had done the deconstructing was no, it's not true. It was something that happened to me. I didn't have a choice. I just woke up one day and I just didn't have the faith anymore. And I had to go through this process of figuring out what I believed so that I could have faith again.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were arguing back and forth. And the main point that the deconstructionist guy made was he asked the Christian, could you just start believing in anything you want right now? And he was no, you can't. I couldn't make you believe that 2 + 2 is 5 right now. You could tell yourself, I'm going to start believing 2 + 2 is 5, but you can't just start making yourself believe it.
Right.
And so it makes that part, it makes sense, right? Mm-hmm. But I think it's a deeper topic than just, you get to choose to believe automatically or you don't, choose at all. It just happens to you. I thought it was a little more nuanced, but it's also a really popular topic to talk about right now, so I thought it'd be fun if we discussed it a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely something that's, a lot more... you're saying deep, it's nuanced, more than just because I can't, if your kids are listening and you have lied to them and told them Santa's real, cover their ears. As adults, we're not just gonna, tell them, or we can't as adults just decide that Santa's real. Mm-hmm. We know there's too much evidence to say that he doesn't exist.
Right.
The physics, all that stuff. It's so.
Physics.
Yeah, he can't travel. There's no way he gets all those houses.
Oh, yeah. But he can be real and just not
Sure, he's a liar.
Do it that way. But he could do it if he could manipulate gravity. If he had that ability, then he could do it.
We do have UFOs now that have manipulated. It looks like they manipulate gravity.
It's the only way they could exist. Is if they know how to do that.
That's actually we just figured it out. Actually,
Santa's an
all
alien.
of Joe Rogan's questions about the UFOs. It's Santa. But that being said, right? You're not just gonna believe one day oh yeah, Santa's real. You'd have to be really convinced over a period of time with a lot of sufficient evidence to decide that.
Right.
Right? And so I wonder, like, a couple questions go through my head, right? How did people get to the point where they just woke up without faith? Were they in an environment where they actually had these struggles a long time ago, but everyone kept saying just have faith, and they suppressed it long enough, and then finally they got tired of suppressing?
Right.
So it wasn't like a new problem; it's always been there.
Right. Yeah.
And they didn't get like properly trained, or like, yeah, everyone has to go through their own process of finding out that. But I always wonder, like, you know, like we were talking about this before. It's not like one big choice; it's a bunch of small things that lead up to this big thing, right? And so, yeah, you want to share?
Yeah, I think it's both. Both sides are right. I think it happens to you, like having or not having faith is something that happens to you, but also it's something that you choose. In one sense, faith is a gift from God, right? So, like, if anybody has faith, it's a gift from God, just like the base level of faith. But it's also something you cultivate and build at the same time too, no matter what you believe in.
Right.
Like, I'm going to be able to have more faith in certain, like, math things if I study math. Like, if you're a child, like, you may not realize like 10 plus 10 is 20 until you know what 10 is, right?
Yeah,
and you know how to add it to another 10, and you know how to get 20, right? Like, it exists in reality, it's a truth, but you may not know how to believe in that kind of thing because you don't know how to do it. You know, like, you don't know the properties of it. And so I think things can seem like they're happening to you when in reality your life circumstances are just having something like be there based off of your little choices. And it is partially environment, and it's also partially like the choices you make. Like, if you're someone who's a Christian, you're searching for answers, and then you've asked some people, they told you just to have faith, which is, I think, the most common answer, right?
Right.
I was talking to a girl yesterday, actually, who was kind of deconstructing and trying to help her with her faith. And she was like, man, I had all these questions for people, but like my pastors were just telling me like I just had to have faith for it, and like I just didn't understand. And I kind of suppressed it for long enough. I just decided, okay, I'm just not going to be able to understand God or the Bible, and so I'm not going to try to understand it. I'm just going to be a Christian and not think about it. And so she did that for long enough that like one day she's like, I just don't know like what I believe anymore because I don't believe it. Like, I've just been telling myself I do, but I don't actually believe it, right? I'm not convinced of it.
Yeah.
And so, like, that person, like, had their environment was an environment where they didn't have anybody to answer their questions, and so they were told to do something that was good for them, which is, like, just have faith, which isn't good. But, like, they were told it was good for them to just have faith, and so they did that thing they thought, like, they made that choice that was good for them, but it led to something happening to them, which was they don't have faith anymore, because they were just trying to conjure it up out of nothing, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's a combination of like things in your environment happening to you, but also you making a lot of little choices to have faith, right? And those little choices are like, what are you studying? What are you researching? And I think the process for a lot of people who deconstruct is one of letting things happen to you until you come to a point where you're not satisfied letting them happen to you anymore, and you make a conscious decision to actually start taking action and researching what you think is true, right? So it's sort of like deconstruction is almost like a kick out of apathy, or out of like letting life or letting belief happen to you, a kick out of that like place, and now you're confronted with, I need to figure out what I believe because I don't know anymore.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And it can be so overwhelming that it's like this idea like, oh my gosh, I think like maybe God doesn't exist and I feel overwhelmed. And maybe say, well, now I have to explore, does he exist? And maybe you go to the source that says he doesn't because you want to see if there's validity in their argument, rather than going to the source that says, no, God does exist and here's the arguments for it. So you just might go to the wrong source. And as you were talking, I was thinking like...
Not necessarily like the wrong source, but like if you're only going to that source, then it's bad.
Right. Well, that's like, you know, like the scriptures say, like one argument seems right until another comes along. Right. So if you're only looking at one argument, then you're going to follow that one argument, you know. And that's what happens with a lot of people in like politics that are growing up in this idea of politics. They only listen to that one news source, and you know, it's an echo chamber. But I was thinking, as you were saying, it's kind of like, I imagine it's kind of like eating, right? So someone's like eating, they're younger, and they're like eating this food.
Younger? Oh, okay.
Like young.
Okay, I just don't understand what that is.
Yeah, so they're young and they're eating food, and they're like, oh, I think I want healthier food. Like, and someone says. They tell someone, like maybe a nutritionist or their parent, they're like, hey, I think this food's unhealthy for me. Like, I don't understand how this is healthy. And someone's like, oh, just believe it's healthy. Yeah. It's healthy, it's fine, it's healthy. I promise, just trust me, it's healthy. And they just keep this cycle of eating, and it's like, okay, I trust you, you said it's healthy, okay, I trust. You said it's healthy, and all of a sudden they're overweight, they're obese, and they might say, well, obesity just happened to me, so now I'm going to fight against this, and I'm going to stop eating the thing I thought was like good for me, and start eating like going somewhere else. And that's what it's like. It's like, well, obesity didn't happen to you. It may have happened by the nurture around you, like nature versus nurture. It might have happened by what your environment was surrounded with, and like what you were being fed and who you listened to. And like this idea of like, oh, you have all these hard questions, just have faith, is not a good foundation to build your faith on. You know, there's some things that we do need to have just faith in. Like the Bible says, without faith, it's impossible to please God. So you can't totally discredit like, okay, I don't need any faith, I have to have all the answers. But there are genuine answers for really hard questions, right? That's why we started the podcast. So it's kind of like, well, obesity didn't happen to you. You just were misinformed about what the nutrition you were getting was.
Right.
And so then they might go somewhere else and say, well, I'm not going to eat anything, and then become anorexic. And they're like, oh, see, this is working. I'm not obese. It's like, yeah, but you're also really unhealthy. The trick is to not stop eating. The trick is to eat differently. So don't just give up on God. Study God in a new way and find that true deep meaning, right? So it's kind of like it could be a result of a lot of different things, but you can't just say it happened and I had no say in it.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, I think the main argument you can make against that is that the process of having faith in anything again after you lose it, and like if you're some kind of religion and then you lose the faith in that religion, like you're going to place your faith in something else, right? And so like the process of reaccumulating faith in whatever else it is a process that happens through a lot of little decisions like you're talking about. So if you're going to regain the faith you had, or you're going to place your faith in something else, no matter what, it's a process of working and making a whole bunch of little decisions to get to a certain place. So I think like you have to take the wisdom of both of those sides, that one is saying like things don't happen to you, like you chose this, and then the other side saying it'll just happen to me. Like they're both sort of true in that like you're making a lot of little decisions, but it didn't like you didn't choose one day like I don't believe in God anymore, like from 100 to 0, right? Or most people don't do that.
Right, exactly. And that's like, again, like I like to always think in analogies, but it's like if you were in education and you're like, oh, I just happened to fail this class. It's like, well, probably not. You probably made the choice to go out with friends rather than study. You probably made the choice to not take all the notes or not study your notes or doodle rather than taking notes. And like,
there is a possibility though for people that are listening, I guess for us too, that like there could be a spiritual attack on someone.
Absolutely.
That like that could happen to them. That's like kind of the only instance I can think of like that happened to them, or maybe there's a tragedy that happened to them or something like that caused them to start doubting their faith, and it wasn't like a choice they made, but something that did actually happen.
That's actually, I like that.
They have to
point,
start to reconstruct.
That's a really good point, especially the spiritual attack, right? I think we're the spiritual, and I'm happy you brought that up. I feel like what I'm about to say, you would think that I would have brought this up earlier, but I didn't. You know, the spiritual world is so much more real than we think. You know, not everything's just natural, and so
I thought it was only kind of real.
People
it's
say
really real.
Yeah, it's really real. It's a reality.
Whoa.
So this world, people say like the physical is made from the spiritual and stuff like that.
The physical is made from the spiritual?
Yeah, because God is spirit and he created everything.
Okay.
But that's what people say. Either way, you know, there's like a real enemy who really wants to destroy your soul. And he's going to throw all kinds of things at you to get you to do that. He's going to try to lie to you, to really get you to doubt. And, you know, part of what we're supposed to do as Christians is to take every thought captive. That doesn't mean suppress and say, no, have faith. I'm just going to ignore that. It's like, okay, this thought came to me. Let me evaluate it. Let me explore it. Let me see what the biblical truth is. Let me see what these arguments are. Let me see what the philosophical arguments are. And then, like, you can really, like, philosophically and theologically prove that, like, God exists and it's the God of the Bible, right? And you can give yourself all this evidence. So we were saying that earlier with the Santa example. You're going to need a lot of evidence to say Santa's real.
Right.
So you need a lot of evidence to say God is real. It's the God of the Bible. And we have that. It's out there. It's available.
Yeah. And I think thinking in terms of, like, it happens to you, but I think in thinking of terms like you just choose it is sort of a little bit implying, like, it's so obvious. When in reality, like, faith is something you have to work towards, and if it was, like, that obvious, everybody would be a Christian, right? Like, if it didn't take work to build your faith, then it would just be plain to everybody that Christianity is the way, and everybody would be a Christian when told about it, right? Or when made aware of it. But it just isn't that way, because there's obviously lots of people who aren't Christians for a lot of good and a lot of bad reasons. and it just isn't apparent to some people.
Would you say fair reasons rather than good reasons?
Yeah, I would say good reasons too.
Okay.
Yeah. Fair and good. Like, there's good reasons not to be a Christian to a lot of people. And I would say, like, they're not good enough, in my opinion, for you not to be a Christian, which is why I'm a Christian. But for that person,
it's good enough.
Yeah, but, like, I could make good arguments against theism and against Christianity that, if left alone, are good arguments on their own. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because to say that's not true is to claim that everybody that's not a Christian is illogical.
Yes.
Right?
They are.
And I don't think that's necessarily true. I think there's people who are logically convinced, like, based off of good arguments, that, like, God isn't real or Christianity isn't the way to God or something like that, which is why there's so many people who debate Muslims, right? Because Muslims are, like, very logically convinced that the God they follow is the one true God, Allah, and, like, we debate them all the time, and they debate us, and it's heated. Right?
Yeah.
And it goes back and forth, and there's good arguments on both sides. Right?
For sure.
And obviously, like, because of all the study we've done, we're convinced Christianity is true, and that everything else is not true, right? But there's lots of people who are, like, logically convinced in other places. Anyway, all of that is just to say that, like, I think that's another reason, like, it can't just be, like, a choice you make all of a sudden. It's not that apparent. You have to put in the work and really come to a faith that is both a gift from the Lord, but also something you put in time and effort into, right? To build and to cultivate.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, if you have fire, someone might give you fire, you have to keep adding to the fire, keep building onto the fire, or else it's going to go out.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just a lot of questions for people when they are deconstructing. It's a lot of, like, well, one, you always want to be empathetic and hear them out and understand what's happening, because, like you said, it could be spiritual attack, it could be trauma, it could be, like, suppressed confusion that they didn't have wise counsel around.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of it where I'm like, I wonder what was the environment, their spiritual environment, like before they deconstructed.
Yeah.
Because I would wonder actually how many people in the deconstruction, if we could, I don't know if there's a way to find this out, but how many of the people in the deconstruction movement are coming from what backgrounds? Is it non-denom? Is it Reformed? Is it charismatic? Is it Catholic? Because that would be really interesting to see, like,
I think it's all of them.
Yeah, but there has to be a majority somewhere. I would think non-denom right off the bat.
Really?
Yeah.
I think that's just because that's the majority of the people you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or if anyone,
for example, I think there's probably lots of Catholics that are deconstructing, but I don't know that because I don't know a lot of Catholics.
Right.
You know what I mean? But I know a lot of non-denom people that are deconstructing because I know a lot of non-denom people.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, just be interesting about those metrics, because then it might show, like, well, whoever has the least deconstruction, maybe they have the best teachings, possibly.
The only thing that I know about what you're talking about is what people reconstruct to, because usually people don't reconstruct to the same tradition, which is really interesting. Like, a lot of non-denom people I know are reconstructing to be Reformed or reconstructing to be Catholic, because they want the structure, the liturgy that is in both of those things. Right?
Yeah.
And so I know, like, a lot of people are doing that. I also know a lot of people who had the structure and were, like, maybe more, like, fundamentalists, right? Are deconstructing out of that and into more, like, charismatic circles, right? Yeah. It's really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. Doesn't mean either of those are, like, wrong, necessarily. I mean, obviously, one has to be wrong. But, yeah, I think it's interesting.
Yeah, for sure.
No, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
No, yeah.
I also wonder, like, my cynical part of me hears people say it wasn't a choice, it just happened, and it kind of makes me feel a little bit like how many of those people, not all of them because there's honest people, but how many of them are just saying that to shirk the responsibility of belief? Like, I don't want it to be my fault that I stopped believing. I don't want that responsibility. That's a big deal. That I stopped believing in God, it just happened to me. So, like, now I don't have the responsibility or the guilt or the weight of that decision on me. I'm just a victim of this thing.
Right.
Where it's like, maybe you were,
there's a little bit of victim mentality in that.
Yeah. It's like, maybe you were, but also, like, it can't be everyone.
Yeah. I think that doubt is definitely something that can happen to you where you are a victim of it, but it's just such a case of, like, one size not fitting all, that you can't just, like, make blatant statements about, like, you had this process away from it, or you made a choice, right? It can't be, like, just one or the other. Like, lots of things happen that are different, and a lot of people have different environments they come from, and so different people are going to experience doubt in different ways. Like, some people, maybe they made a whole bunch of little steps, like, away from away from faith that were like logical, but they did it like very subconsciously, and then it kind of all hit all at once, and it seemed very much like it just happened to them because it was all subconscious. They were suppressing all of it, and so mentally and intellectually to them, it seemed like this all was happening all at once. When in reality, it was a lot of little choices. But then maybe there's a person who they're being spiritually attacked at the same time, like one of their parents gets cancer or something like that, and then all of a sudden they have all these doubts about the character of God and who He is. Like that's something that happened to them, not like a whole bunch of choices they made away from God. So it's hard to say like just one size or one thing fits everybody. I think you just have to have wisdom and be like, you can't just try to be a victim. Like you can't just say everybody that deconstructs is a victim of doubt. A lot of people, like maybe they made all these choices away from God. Maybe they were misinformed on all of the sources they were listening to. Maybe they had sin in their life or something. Maybe they genuinely like and agree with the arguments against God, logically agree with those more than the ones for Him. That's intellectually honest, and that's like you're not being a victim, right? And that's like that's not like it is bad to not believe in God, but it's like a less bad way of doing it than like lying or something.
How many people, or do you can't quantify this off the top of your head, but like would you think there's a large portion of people who are deconstructing, or they think they're deconstructing, but they actually truly were never Christians? They were just like cultural Christians. They did the thing, they looked good, but they didn't have an actual relationship with Jesus.
Are you trying to figure out like how many of those people?
No, I'm saying like I think that's a high likelihood that people who are in the deconstruction movement actually just weren't ever Christians, because I think at least I don't want to be like rude or like make people feel like their relationship with Jesus is disingenuous, but I just know like how my relationship with it is and my experience with Jesus, and I'm just like I could never be convinced that He doesn't exist or that He's not real.
Yeah, I think it's impossible to say. I think because of the large number of just nominal Christians that exist in general, just by like cultures causing people to be Christian, not because they actually want to be Christian.
Well, that's the thing. Are those people even Christians?
I mean, we can't really say whether or not they're Christians because you don't know. Like, you can't judge someone necessarily like that. You can,
it's
you can look at their actions and stuff like that, but it would be harder to say. If I had to guess, I would say it's probably looks a lot like the cultural statistics of like how many nominal Christians there are versus how many like I don't know what you want to call it, like sold out Christians or practicing Christians there are. It would seem to me like if you were the most of the public displays of people deconstructing, right? That it's like it's a big deal. Someone's struggling with their faith, right? Like the deconstruction is a really big deal. They actually believe something really intensely, and that's why the deconstruction process is so hard, and why they even call it deconstruction. If you're just like a cultural Christian, like you're not following God in any of His ways anyway. You don't have to deconstruct. Like you're not losing anything you actually believed in. Right. You're just like,
for sure.
Oh, you don't claim to be Christian anymore. That was your whole deconstruction process.
It's not as emotional.
Well, it's not emotional at all necessarily. Like let's say you're just a nominal Christian, like you don't really follow or practice at all. Maybe you say you have a relationship with Christ. That's like a fun thing to say. Yeah. And you're like, I have a relationship with God. I believe in Him. But like, what's the deconstruction process for you? Like, unless you're not going to be a theist anymore, like, you weren't missing anything from your lifestyle anyway that was like Christian. You know what I mean? Like, you were already doing whatever you wanted to do, living your life how you wanted to live it. Like, you weren't changing your life to be a Christian at all. And so there's not really this like divide that happens, or this like split that happens in your life anymore.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's fair.
Yeah.
I'd say that makes sense.
Yeah. That's what I would say. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Deconstruction is very interesting though. Like, it's changed so much in the last like year to 2 years that we've been covering it. Right.
Yeah. It's taken on a lot of different ways and gained different popularities and stuff like that. And
it's almost like cringy on TikTok now. like about a year ago, or maybe like 2 years ago. Starting 2 years ago, and through like the last year and a half, it was just like popping. Like that was like they were getting tons of views on Instagram and TikTok and stuff like that, and YouTube. And everybody was like super into it, like a fad almost. Yeah. And people were genuinely like losing and regaining their faith and stuff. And now, like some of those same accounts make videos, and it's like everybody's so far past that to where like most people have rebuilt their faith or have lost their faith completely, that it's kind of like why are you still making the same videos? You know
right.
what I mean?
Well,
like,
now they have a following, and now they need to sustain it because
Yeah.
it might have become a career.
and it's based off of like just like
Right.
deconstructions. It's like
Yeah.
you can't make any other content.
Yeah.
Because I'll see people who are making videos, and I think to myself, like, I saw you make the same video, like, a year ago, and just, like, you and your own, like, spiritual development, like, you haven't gone past this. Like, choose a different path and start walking that way. Like,
Right.
why are you still sitting in this, like, place of, like, just not moving past or moving
haven't
forward
done
with your
anything.
life? Like,
Right.
if I deconstructed my faith, like, I am not thinking about Christianity anymore. Like, unless I think, maybe if you had, like, a deep wound. Like, it makes sense.
Which that, I think, is a lot of probably what deconstruction is people have been seriously hurt.
Yeah.
And they're trying to find some answers.
Yeah. If you had a deep wound, I can see you thinking about it a lot if you don't want to process it, like, correctly or something like that. But, like, these people that I'm seeing aren't, like, harping on, like, church abuse or something. It's just, like, these random videos. And I'm just like, guys, there's better information you can get from scholars, like, about this kind of stuff. And you made this video, like, 4 different times. And it's clear either you just are terrible at moving past, like, old things and, like, oh, no, there's contradiction in the Bible. Like, you couldn't, like, move past that from a year ago. Like, you're still making a video
Well,
about
that's
it.
the thing. Also, it's like, if you are not a Christian anymore, why do you care?
Yeah. And so my thought is either you can't move past it or you, like, like, everything you think you want to know about this, and you just need to make content, so you're just recycling this, like, thought
That's
again.
probably what it is.
It's a possibility, too. But it was just a little cringy.
Yeah.
And I was like, what made the deconstruction movement so popular back 2 years ago was that there's a lot of people being really, really honest with, like, where they were, and Christians and humans in general just love that. Like, we love people being genuine and being in a hard place and being like, this is what's happened to me. This is genuinely where I am. I want to, like, be a Christian, but, like, these things, I'm trying to work through it. And, like, the videos they would make would be, like, their process of them working through this space of not believing, going either towards not believing or belief. Right?
Yeah.
And that was, like, really genuine. But now it's, for a lot of the people, it's moved past that place to, like, they kind of know where they're at now, and they still have to keep making content, or they know where they're at, but, like, they're still kind of mad about it, and they still gotta...
Yeah, well, bitterness also. Like, if you're ranting, if you're bitter and hurt, and you... Like, the ranting feels good.
Yeah.
And also all the likes and comments.
And that's not to say, like, that it's cringy to deconstruct in general. Like, there's lots of people who are doing it now that, like, genuinely need help. And I'm not saying they're cringy. I'm just saying, like, some of these creators that are obviously doing it for the content, like, creation now, and not because it's genuine, is what's cringy.
Yeah. Definitely. But yeah, it's definitely, like, also kind of like, if you're in an ocean, right, and you're swimming, if you end up, like, drifting along the shore, and all of a sudden you look up and like, oh, I'm really far away from my beach, like, site where I was, like, tanning.
Yeah.
That's kind of, I think, also what maybe happens to some people in deconstruction is, like, maybe there's things like the whole suppressing thing. If you're trying to suppress all these questions, you're just going to drift, and all of a sudden you're like, wow, I'm so far from shore. That just happened. It happened to me, right? And it's like, oh man, like, so how do we prevent that, right? How do people, I don't want to say prevent deconstruction necessarily, because sometimes it can be a really formative process to go through to answer those questions.
Absolutely.
So not necessarily, like, maybe avoid deconstruction because I think it's bad for the soul, but how would you advise someone who is, like, having all these questions, they're starting that road of deconstruction, and they want to do it in, like, a really integral way, they want to be a Christian, like, where would you point them in the direction?
I would just say I can't give an answer to that question because everybody deconstructs and reconstructs or whatever you want to say for different reasons. Like, my answer to someone whose parent, like, died and they're having doubts is going to be completely different to like, someone's process of, like, oh, I realized that, like, the Bible says 2 different things about the same topic. Like, how do I reconcile that, right? Like, my answer is going to be different to those people. One's going to be intellectual, the other one's going to be very emotional, and they're going to take different amounts of time to solve and all these kind of things. So I don't really know if I can answer that necessarily. I mean, the main answer I think most people give is, like, well, you have to be okay with asking questions, and most people suppress, like, your ability to even ask questions or question, like, is the Bible valid, or does God actually exist? Like, most people are afraid of those things. So taking away the fear and being able to be, like, truthful with yourself is, like, a very healing and, like, good freeing process that people need to go through, if Christian or not Christian, right? But, like, I can't give that advice to someone who's doubting because, like, of a tragedy or an abuse that happened, right?
Right.
Because obviously they're being genuine with themselves because they're doubting because of this, like, crazy thing that happened. So, like,
Right.
me giving an intellectual proof or theodicy for, like, the problem of evil or something that's happening in their life isn't necessarily what they need unless they want that as well. Like, probably what they need is to be comforted by the Lord.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. That would be the answer I'd give them.
That's good. I think, yeah, it has to do with a lot, like, asking questions, I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
And really getting down to the bare bones of the matter, in a sense. Because I think people who experience tragedies and stop believing in Jesus are probably wrestling with the problem of evil, right?
A lot of them, yeah.
They're probably asking, like, well, how could God do this? If God loved me, why would he let this happen to me?
Mm-hmm.
And people don't like the answer, but it's like, well, there's depending on what everything is, it's like, there's free will and there's sin in the world. Like, it's going to be bad. It's going to be a bad time.
Yeah.
And, like, one thing, I was talking to someone who was, I won't say who, because I don't know if they want this out there, but someone asked them, like, they were talking to their coworker, and they were saying, like, oh, hey, like, when I was a kid, like, all this trauma happens, all this abuse happened to me, like, why did God let that happen to me? Why did God let that sin happen to me? And this person goes, well, why does God let you sin now?
Yeah.
And it's kind of like that. It's the same answer. You know, like, sin is sin. And if you are, like, lying to your spouse or your boss or, like, being disrespectful, gossiping, it's deserving of punishment, just like, you know, trauma is, or like a serious problem, like church abuse. And it's like, well, if God lets you sin and you feel like, well, I don't want God to infringe my free will, it's like, yeah, no one does, you know?
Yeah.
And so I guess, like, all that to say, it's like, if you can, I would think, through talking to people and hearing them out and being empathetic, if you can get them to get down to the very, like, bottom line of the thing, like, if this is true, can you still believe in God if this is true?
Mm-hmm.
And how does this invalidate God's existence? How does this invalidate God's existence? And maybe there's so much that they're going through and so hard that it's just overwhelming. So now they can't emotionally handle processing that, which is fair. But if you can get them to be like, hey, like, all this is going on, like, God has to, like, and also it's like, if Jesus resurrected, that's also the nail in the coffin.
I think it's none of that matters when you're going through such an emotional process.
Right.
Or it doesn't matter to you.
Right. I would think a way that could help while you're going through that emotional process is to ask these questions before you get there. And you don't know, like, when you're going to go through a traumatic experience. So that's why we need to be ready today. You know, like, the Bible says, always be ready to give a defense for your faith. So that's why we should be studying now, looking at these things now, and prepare ourselves now for when the storm comes, we can handle some weathering. Yeah. You know? And that's true with anything. If you're building a house, you're going to build the house to, like, well, I know the windstorm's not coming right now, but I want to be prepared if it does. That's why we have insurance. I know I don't need the hospital bill I'm not in the hospital right now, but I might be, so I want insurance. Yeah. And so as we invest in our faith, when we're healthy and we're capable, when we have, like, a clear mind and we're not going through a hard time, we're able to build up ammo to help us during the doubting. Yeah. That's not to say it'll always keep you all the way through, but it'll help you as, like, a flotation device.
Yeah. Nice.
Yes, sir.
Nice. Well, anything else you want to say?
Nope.
Thanks for listening to the podcast, everybody. You can find us on Patreon, Instagram, TikTok, all the places. Check us out. We're on YouTube as well, everywhere else. If you have any questions or you have any topics you want us to cover, let us know. DM us. We got stickers, all that kind of stuff. If you want to maybe redesign our logo, let us know too. Let us know. We're looking to do that as well. So hope you guys have a good week, and we'll see you next week.
All those links are in the description below, so check it out.
Yep.